My name is Ronnie Talent, and I'm really happy that you guys are helping me with this over here. I have a business called, let me start with this. In the Toastmasters manual, they said that the icebreaker speech is where we introduce ourselves to people, so people can find out a little bit about us. And a lot of people use this opportunity to talk about their families or their jobs or their hopes and dreams. Well, I own a business called addinghair.com. I'm a consultant for the hair loss industry. I know a little bit about the hair loss industry. I worked with a company called Hair Club for Men, worked for another company called Boxley Medical Group, had my own firm called Legacy Hair Center for about 17 years. Now, the name of the speech is called Finishing What You Started. And the reason why that's important to me is this. As some of you know, this isn't my first icebreaker speech. This is actually my second icebreaker speech. I went down this road a few years ago and didn't really get all that far. And I was going through a stressful time in my life, and I thought I was going to have to do some speaking for my business. And since it was kind of a stressful time, I didn't think I'd compound that stress by public speaking, because public speaking is kind of scary. So basically I put it on the shelf. I have a confession to make to all you folks. Even though I've been in the hair business for a long time, I don't like the hair business. As a matter of fact, when I was a little kid, I didn't sit up all night thinking, I really want to talk to people about their hair loss. That wasn't the dream. That wasn't my dream when I was a kid. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write books. As a matter of fact, I've written books. I've written 8 books and 3 screenplays. Now, some people might say, wow, that's impressive. To those people, I say this. Anyone can write. Anyone can write books. But what people really want as an author is you want people to read your books. Now, I would write books and put them up on Amazon, and people would read them. I mean, I had one of my books that thousands of people read, but it never really took off the way that I wanted it to. And I think I know the reason why. The reason why is writers just don't write books. They promote books. They do interviews. They do talks. They do book tours. They do all these different things to promote their books, and that's public speaking. Public speaking is scary. I didn't really like that, so for the past 20 years, I've been chained to a desk while pipes explode in the walls and stylists calling in sick and trying to keep a business together during the recession, and I didn't want to be there. So I got this idea. I knew that stylists all over the world wanted to make more money. Okay, I knew that hair salon owners wanted to make a little bit more money and maybe have another profit source for their business. I knew that if they were able to help people with hair loss, they would accomplish those goals. So I started getting this plan in my mind that if I wanted to get out of the business I was in and start another business where I'm helping these people. So I started writing everything down that I knew for the past 20 years. And before I knew it, I had books and videos and audios, and a short while after that, I have thousands of stylists all over the world saying, "Hey, can I see what you're working on over there?" The largest hair replacement manufacturer is a company called Onright. They're in Fort Lauderdale, and they caught wind of what I was doing, and they said, "Ronnie, we're having a big convention. Would you like to come down here and teach 4 classes?" All of this is in 2 weeks. But that's public speaking. I want to thank you all for chatting with me today, because I really need the help. I really need the practice. And if there's one last thing in conclusion I'd like to say to all of you is I believe that Toastmasters is a great place for all of us to dip our toes in the water. And if there's one last thought that I'd like to leave with everybody, it's this. I hope that we all get to finish what we start.
So just curious, do I have an evaluator today?
Yeah.
It's,
Susan, wonderful.
That's my name.
If you were to ask my wife, what is one thing I'm particularly good at? She would always come up with the same answer. Anytime I'm around children or animals, they tend to take to me, if you will. So my wife would always say, he's really good with babies and animals. I'm going to leave the part about adults out of the question for now, but that's one thing that she thinks I'm good at, and I would have to agree. So I'm looking at why I'm good with babies and animals, and trying to put together a little pocket speech. For those of you that have been here, you know what a pocket speech is. For new folks, it's ideas you've put together, maybe thought about before, never presented anywhere. But in reality, it can be totally off the cuff, but usually there's a little preparation involved. I started typing up notes. Hey, guess what? They're in my pocket for today, just to put together a few ideas. So the lesson in today, the title is Baby Talk, as Sharon indicated. The lesson today is to try and garner some tips from what I'm good at in order to help you communicate. So the first part is to communicate on their level. Now, one reason I think I'm good with babies or young children is because right away, when I'm engaged with a child, it's usually like this, depending on the age of the child, or more often, like this. Now, why would that be?
Yeah,
I
I love
get
it.
to their level.
Eye level.
All right.
Exactly. I'm blessed to have two grandchildren, as most of you know. One's 6, the other's a year and a half, and that's their level. So in order to communicate effectively, you need to understand your audience's level. That doesn't mean in a presentation like this, I'm going to sit down and make a presentation, but you need to understand more in general terms where the level of the audience is. That's really important because if you're not on their level, they're going to miss most of what you have to say. So it's critical that you speak to them on their level. You need to understand your environment, your surrounding, the point of what you're trying to get across, and understand how engaged they are. Once you're at their level, then you can begin to read some of the physical signs as well. Again, I'm going to use my grandchildren as an example here. I think they'd be okay with that. One of them's a year and a half old. For those of you that have children or have had children in the past, you know they understand a lot, but they may not be able to verbalize everything they understand. You're going through the same thing right now, right? Your boy's about the same age as my granddaughter, and it's amazing how much she can talk and not say anything that we understand. We don't want to get into that position. We want to be able to talk and have the person on the other end understand. Now, I imagine, what's his name?
Jack.
Jack. I imagine Jack is now doing very well at simple commands. Give this to mommy.
He's only 6 months.
Oh, he's 6 months, I'm sorry.
Ava's 2.5, so yes.
Okay. Well, you remember what it's like. They get to the point where they can take
Yes,
simple
she's-
commands, and they reach this point where, again, they're talking a lot but not saying anything. You can understand. You don't want to be on the other end of that. You want to make sure you're speaking to them at their level. So it's critical that you do that. That's one thing. The other thing is when you're dealing with children or animals even more so, I think, in this case, you're not looking for perfection in your communication. You're simply looking to improve and to be effective, not perfection, simply effective. Get the job done, whatever it is you're trying to do. So when you're dealing with again, I'll use the example of children, don't go in the street. That's the main thing you want to do, is make sure they don't go in the street. So you have to take charge of the situation. You don't want to go into all the details necessary as to to a 1-year-old, why they can't go in the street. They simply won't understand it. 80% of it will go over their head. Word selection is particularly important. Knowing your audience is critical, as I've been talking about. One thing I think about communication that we can all utilize is to keep in mind that we're really speaking to people, even in groups. Ronnie, maybe this is helpful to you. We're still trying to engage the person on an individual basis. You're going to be speaking to 60 people at a time. That may be difficult, but you need to utilize the resources you have to engage people. That means reading their faces, understanding their body language, getting close to them. Again, easier with children. Okay with some animals, not with others. Your own pets, fine. Eye contact. we talk about eye contact all the time. How do you know if that person is engaged with you if you're not making eye contact with them? You literally don't know. So one of the skills that we all develop at Toastmasters is maintaining that eye contact. They may not be looking at you, but that's okay, because you want to understand where they are, and you want to be able to, if you will, snap them out of their daze. I go into dazes a lot when people speak too long or speak on a subject I'm not interested in. So what I want to do in particular is engage the person to get my point across. Isn't that right, Brendan? Okay. Understanding where they are and what they're going through. The other thing I'd like to mention, aside from getting on their level, engaging them one-on-one, whether it's one-on-one or not, is to use all your senses. Woke up this morning, I'm kind of a little bit anal about some things. I had breakfast A or breakfast B. Today was breakfast B day. It's the same thing every B day or alternate day. Once or twice a week I'll switch it out, but usually it's A or B. So I stick the muffin in the microwave, it's frozen. I set it on what I thought was 25 seconds defrost, and I walk away to do something else. About 2-3 minutes later, smoke everywhere. I don't understand why the alarm didn't go off, it's down the hall. Use your senses. I smelled it first. I went in the back in the kitchen, and when I opened the microwave door, I thought there was going to be a fire. So use your senses in understanding what the situation is. In this case, it was smell, and then seeing what was happening. The microwave, I opened it up, it was charred black, if you will. I made another one. But the point is, use your senses. Observe. Know what's going on. One of my favorite characters of all time, those of you that know me know this well, is Yogi Berra. First quotes, he said many funny things. One of the things he said was, you can observe a lot just by watching. You can observe a lot just by watching. And again, that's what you want to do. Use all your senses in understanding where the audience is and how you're getting across to them. So all those things work as well with animals, although I've been focusing on children today. 3 key points: get on their level, engage, and use your senses. Madam Toastmaster.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just give a little bit of color as to the speech structure before I jump in. This is from the Public Relations Manual, so it's an advanced manual. It's speech 4. It's called Delivering Under Fire, as Sonja mentioned, as part of her comments as timer. So this speech is broken into 2 parts. The first part is some opening comments from myself, which is timed 3 to 5 minutes. The purpose of the speech is to bring up a somewhat controversial issue to the audience, and then be prepared to A, try to influence the audience's opinion, and then B, be prepared for some hard-hitting, tough questions, which you will fill the role of. That is 2 to 3 minutes in time. So we're going to have 3 to 5 minutes from myself, 2 to 3 minutes from the audience. I do appreciate your participation in helping me complete this objective in the manual. I remember driving home the day I was laid off from TIAA CREF. And I really didn't know what to make of it. I had a 6-month boy at home. I'm a well-educated, well-credentialed person. How could I lose my job? I was shocked. And I feared having to go home to my wife and explain to her why it was that with this newborn at home, with plans on expanding the family, that this is now what we were dealing with. We're down to 1 income, and frankly, the bigger income in the family was gone. And I think we all felt that way during the financial crisis. We were all a little scared. We were all a little frightened. What was happening to the economy in Charlotte? What was happening to the job market in Charlotte? Our home values, our friends, our neighbors. Many of us knew somebody who had lost a job during that period of time. It was a scary, scary time. And now that we come through it, there is still a hangover. And we see it in the speeches from the politicians, and we see it in the treatments of some of the larger financial institutions in the way that they're spoken of. Whether it be JP Morgan, whether it be Citigroup, or Charlotte's hometown bank, Bank of America. Now, many of you might be familiar with Bank of America. It surely has a great presence here in Charlotte. For longtime Charlotteans, you're certainly familiar with the background. Started off as a very humble bank, North Carolina National Bank, NCNB. And a very industrious man named Hugh McCall took the reins, and through a series of mergers, they took the name Nations Bank. They eventually bought Bank of America out of California, took that name, and then the most recent successful merger, at least, was the one with Fleet up in the Northeast, which really gave Bank of America that heft in terms of its footprint. Unfortunately, there were some other mergers that came after that, one being Countrywide Financial and the other being Merrill Lynch. But if we think about the precedents there in terms of bringing on these new companies and growing that and the legacy of Hugh McCall, we know how he's touched so many different areas of Charlotte, whether it be the Arts and Science Council, the various awards in his name, his founding of Center City Partners. In fact, it's very difficult to walk uptown and not feel the presence of Bank of America and all it's meant to Charlotte. Which is why sometimes when I hear people, especially Charlotteans, talking about, I would never bank with Bank of America, I would never give them my business, it surprises me. See, maybe they don't know about the millions of dollars that Bank of America donates into this community, whether it be to the various art museums, whether it be to national causes, such as last year's Super Bowl. You might remember Bono giving away his songs as part of Bank of America's Red campaign that raised that day alone over $3 million, which covered 8 million days worth of AIDS treatments for AIDS sufferers in Africa. Or it's just the day-to-day things here in the community that we see and that we experience, but do we really think of it when we say we would never bank with Bank of America? Bank of America has paid over $70 billion in fines coming out of the mortgage crisis. $70 billion in fines. $70 billion. Now, these weren't Bank of America Charlotte employees. It was mostly Merrill Lynch. It was mostly Countrywide. These weren't Bank of America loans, but Bank of America feels the brunt of it. But I wonder what would happen to Charlotte if we lost Bank of America, if we did break up the bank. What would happen to those 15,000 employees that work here and their families? And what would they feel like driving home that day when they lost their job and your neighbor tells you that they don't know what they're going to do, that they might have to short sell their house, that they might have to bring their kids out of private school, that they might have to move? I think the time has come that we move past these legacy issues that were 7, 8 years ago, in which we could talk about how the blame should be laid, but that's not a productive conversation. A productive conversation is seeing where we are today and where the bank is in the community, and remembering that Bank of America is Charlotte's hometown bank. I'd be happy to take some questions.
How do you survive 70 billion?
Well, the truth of it is, if you look at the 70 billion, a lot of it was loan forgiveness for mortgages where had fallen into arrears that perhaps were not made under the best standards. So a lot of that number really has been forgiveness of loans that perhaps shouldn't have been made. A lot of it is in education, and certainly there is a lot of it in cash. Bank of America is a very big bank. At the time of the financial crisis, there was about 250,000 employees. Now we're closer to about 220, heading towards about 200. So that's 50,000 jobs that are shrinking, taking down expenses, raising productivity, and it's over 5 years. So if you spread it out over the 5 years of the non-cash charges, that's how we've gotten to that number. Susan?
Go ahead, Susan. Well, I'll just comment. How is Bank of America reaching out to connect to the average consumer? Because what you're talking about is on a more global level. So if I was to bank with Bank of America, and I currently don't, and if they were to earn my business, what are they doing to earn it?
Sure. So Bank of America has made a lot of changes in the way that we bank with the individual consumer. A lot of the concern that we saw in the past was around fees, particularly overdraft fees. So there's been innovation in that space. In the way that you can now open an account, there is no overdraft fees on certain accounts. We won't allow you to overdraft the account. The fees, the policies around fees are a lot more forgiving now in terms of trying to avoid those situations where the bank basically did hit people with multiple fees in a row, which certainly put people in a bad situation. So it's adapting, Sonja, to the needs of the community and of the everyday person and the features that are offered on those accounts. Technology-wise, really a leader in terms of security. You might have heard about the recent leak at JP Morgan. So just keeping in mind what the client needs and being more focused on that in the community. Another good way we give back to the community is through volunteer hours. Bank of America employees during 2014 had over 2 million hours of volunteerisms in their local communities. So whether it be through product innovation or boots on the ground activities within the community, the bank is very focused on relating to its clients. Susan, did you have a question?
Just a comment. I went to the ballet last evening, and it's on Tryon and 9th Street, and I've lived here since 1972, and I've seen all of that. I've seen Hugh McCall bring people in here culturally, restaurants, otherwise, and I never thought I'd live to see the day where you can walk uptown and have all these numerous restaurants, numerous cultural things, and that is really all Hugh McCall.
No, I appreciate that comment. Many of you might be familiar that Johnson & Wales, one of the main reasons was advocacy on part of the bank. So I don't want to prognosticate as to what Charlotte would be without the bank, but I will say that it's probably time to move forward. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Fellow Toastmasters, today I'll be evaluating the very famous Peter Stolmack. His title was Baby Talk, a lesson in communications. And one great thing about Peter, he always manages to couch something in something that we're all familiar with. And he engaged us to begin with by telling us about his wife and what she thinks about him and his skills and his values. You're really good with babies and animals. Well, that's a nice compliment, it really is. Hopefully it leaves out some of the other things that she values in you, but we won't get to that. Peter's always talking about his grandchildren, which makes me feel a little bad. I don't have any yet, but I'm prognosticating about what it's going to be when he starts to have 4 and 5 grandchildren. Will he be just as fascinated as the first 1 or 2? But Peter had a strong opening, and then he made 3 points. Mostly he wants to help us communicate better, which we're all interested in that. Number 1 was to understand your audience, get down to their level. And he was down on the floor, and he flew back up. I was surprised at how supple he is. That's great. Then know your audience, engage the person, and of course, use your senses, which we all have burnt up stuff in the microwave. But I think I really liked Peter's speech where he came out here and he looked at everybody in the eye, 1-to-1, went around the room. And I usually have trouble with that because then I forget what I was speaking about. I get so involved with the person. But I think that was a great example that you do have to look at your audience. You have to get feedback from your audience. You just can't come up here and go through your notes and give your speech irregardless of how it's coming across. I think maybe you probably didn't need the notes. You could have just left them up here because then you couldn't use your left hand to really use all your emotions. You might have had a little more vocal variety with baby talk. But overall, I really liked the speech because it engaged everybody, it was on our level. It was a topic that we're all interested in because we're trying to be better speakers. You had your 3 major points: understand the audience level, engage the audience, and use your senses. And then I love the Yogi Berra quote, "You can observe a lot by watching." So great job. Thank you for your speech.
Brendan gave us a persuasive speech, speaking under fire, and it was presumed that his audience was going to be hostile. So that's why, for those of you who rolled your eyes when I asked that question, I was trying to be hostile intentionally, so that I could help to put Brendan on the spot, see how he would respond. There are a couple of things that you want to keep in mind when you are addressing a hostile audience. The first way to get a hostile audience to be on your side is to find some common ground. And Brendan certainly met that objective because when he opened, he told us a story. Now, I don't know about you, but I know that myself and Cheryl had mentioned we've both been laid off, and there's probably some of you who might have been, Brendan was laid off. If you haven't been laid off from a company yourself, you probably have friends or family that have experienced being laid off. It's not very fun. So by opening with that emotional story, he was able to connect, and he also found some common ground. The second piece of being able to persuade a hostile audience is to demonstrate sincerity. Now with Brendan, I certainly felt that he displayed sincerity, honesty. He was speaking to us openly, and he did that through his body language, through his gestures, and the way he spoke really positively about his current employer, Bank of America. The third piece of actually getting your audience to be persuaded and to diffuse hostility or diffuse emotion is to present fact and figures. If you ever have an emotional audience and you want to lower the emotional level, is start throwing out numbers, facts, statistics. And Brendan certainly did that with his comments. With 8 million raised for the AIDS, also 70 billion in forgiven debt. Those are all statistics. And if you want to elevate the emotional sense of an audience, you want to use more emotional content, like more stories. And that Brendan did not do. So overall, he met really the 3 objectives that you want to see in a persuasive speech in order to get an opposed audience on your side. So excellent job for staying on course, for meeting those 3 objectives. I don't know if you, I think you were intentionally trying to get there, and you mastered that very well. Hopefully you'll never have to be in front of a hostile audience. I thought we were quite mild. Good job with your speech, and I look forward to hearing your next project.
Thank you, Sonja. Well, we have the opportunity, each one of us, to either prognosticate who's going to be the winner or actually vote. So, Madam Timer and Matthew, did Doug, myself, and Sonja all qualify within the time limits? Then please pass your votes along to the vote counter. Matthew, and at this point, I'd like to welcome back our Toastmaster, Cheryl.
All right, now on to what we call the funnest part of the meeting, our opportunity to speak kind of off the cuff and go through our table topics portion of today. So I'd like to invite up to the front Mr. Vaughn, who is our table topics master. I anticipate we're not going to have up to 5. We've read a full agenda, which is a great thing, but I think we have time for 1 or 2. Thank you.